Hi guys, welcome to a question of the Ferrers Sport. This is episode 4 with Tom Davis, a pro triathlete. He's got lots of major honours, including 2 70.3 silver medals, and his latest success was finishing 12th in the PTO World Championships in Daytona, which in what week was an amazing race. Tom, could you just talk to us about your journey?
Yeah, so it's not your sort of traditional journey into triathlons. So I've always been since I was, sort of 10, 11 years old, sort of right up through my school years, and then just sort of club fun. And then I started playing water polo probably when I was 14 or 15, and that really took off. So yeah, from there I played at sort of quite a high level as a junior. Played a couple of international matches and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I came to university and then I sort of felt like I needed a new challenge, really. Water polo is not a massive sport in this country, and I suppose it was just time for a change. And obviously coming from the running and swimming, triathlon seemed a logical step, I suppose. And yes, I've been doing that for the last 4 or 5 years, starting off sort of the Olympic format, and now the last couple I've been doing more sort of the half Ironman and sort of Ironman stuff. So yeah, it's been a quick journey, but it's obviously one that I hope carries on.
That's been a quick and successful journey from sort of our perspective. Obviously, you came onto the scene a few years ago and sort of rocketed up the sort of ladder, and now obviously with that amazing race in Daytona. What drives you to get up in the morning and go training? Because it's not an easy sport to do well in and be successful in.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, yeah, certainly at the minute with the dark mornings and the rain, it can be quite tricky to get yourself out the door. But no, I think the biggest thing is setting yourself goals that really drive you. Your goals have got to be big enough really to get you out and get you doing those sessions. I think that's sort of one of the biggest things I've learned. I mean, the other thing is you've got to enjoy what you're doing. To get out in the dark and the cold, just a lot of the time you have to think about how you'll feel when you get home. It's not, yes, it's horrible getting out, but the feeling you get when you sort of after you come back from, whether it be a horrible wet run, and sometimes they're the best feelings. Sometimes they're the sessions that you feel, I suppose, proud of yourself for getting it done, and actually, that sense of accomplishment is really something that, I think a lot of that drives me a lot as well. Knowing how you'll feel when you get back.
Yeah, it's almost like self-fulfillment that you've ticked off a day, but then you've been successful with ticking off that day, even though that some of your competitors might think, you know what, I'm going to miss today because it's horrible out there. But in yourself that you've done everything you can, and when you get those podium finishes, you've almost earned them along that way. Just a question on inspirations. Obviously, you touched upon water polo and different things along the way. What was your inspiration, or what have you got people that inspire you now?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this one, and actually, I'm not. When I was younger, I wouldn't say I had a specific inspiration or sort of somebody who I looked to, but I think there's been a lot of people along the way who have certainly helped. Sort of whether they be teachers and teachers at school that got me into the water polo, or sort of encouraged me to do the running. I think looking back, they were probably. I'm not sure if I call them role models, but they certainly helped shape my career. But certainly more recently now, I've got into triathlon, and sort of the paths I've been following. I'm very lucky to be surrounded by some quite inspirational and very good athletes. So I think probably the person I look up to most at the minute is someone who I'm quite fortunate to train on most days. So Tim Don, he's sort of quite a obviously, he's been around triathlon for a good amount of time, and he's got your champs and Olympics. But I think more recently he's probably famous for his bike accident out in Kona. But yeah, I mean, he for sure, sort of, just the little bits of advice that he gives me day in day out, I think it's a big part of actually inspiring and becoming a role model is helping out those, is giving those little bits of advice and helping out where you can.
Oh, perfect. And just on that, obviously, you mentioned Tim there. The wealth of talent in British triathlon is absolutely massive at the moment. Is that a good thing? And how do you cope with having so many competitors of a similar standard to yourself?
Yeah, no, I mean, 100% it's a good thing. There's no two ways about it. Competition always helps you get the most out of yourself. And as I touched on before, when it's a horrible day outside, knowing that the other guys are probably facing similar, you've got to go and get it done or you're going to be left behind, really. It's a big part of why we do a lot of it, I suppose. There's also that friendly rivalry, I suppose, that makes it a lot more fun. Gives you more purpose to do each day. I think, and it's great to be able to feed off of that camaraderie and sort of friendships, because we are, triathlon is a great sport in that off the course we're all friends. We've been on training camps where we probably all go and train together, and then 5 days later we're trying to smash each other into the ground in a race. So it's a great atmosphere that we've got, and I think having those friends certainly helps. There's no two ways about it.
Perfect. And on about your preparations for those races, you mentioned obviously training camps, etc. Do you have a set race routine that you do before a race? Obviously, it might change slightly, but is there a certain preparation that you do?
Yeah, I mean, race day is it's probably different for us to most other sports in that races tend to start pretty early in the morning. You're talking, a late start is probably 8-9 o'clock in the morning. Most races probably kick off 6:37, so you don't have a massive amount of time. So I tend to try and keep a standard routine of getting up, 3.5, 4 for the race. Getting a pretty standard, porridge, that sort of thing. Making sure I take some electrolytes, because hydration, over 4 hours or however long you're racing, hydration is a massive component. If you can get a head start, then that's always good. But then race morning is also quite busy in that we normally have to, put the bikes into transition, put the trainers in, register, all sorts of things that take far longer than you always give them time for. So actually having a routine is really important, because at the start you always leave yourself short on time and you end up rushing around the last half an hour. And yeah, then obviously I like to get in and do a bit of a warm up, sort of half hour before the race starts, and then that's it, race. And I suppose then it's home in time for lunch and a pizza or whatever you fancy.
Well, hopefully some people will finish it before lunchtime. Most people obviously won't, so they'll have their tea time snack. Just obviously on that, how do you stay focused during a long race? Because some of them could take a few hours.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's a 4-hour race, and it seems a long time when you say it like that. But actually, the good thing about it, it's really three parts to it, and you can break it down into those 3 parts. You've obviously got the processes in the swim and trying to follow the athlete's feet, or get rid of athletes behind you. There's that aspect to it, and then you're onto a bike. And the first section of the bike, you've got to think around getting your kit sorted after you've been out the swim. Start checking your pacing, and then from then on in, it's just more about actually ticking it off in small sort of 10k or so chunks. Probably looking at hydration. Am I fueling correctly? Am I going too hard? Am I going too easy? What was around me doing? How's the race playing out? So, I've never done a race and felt bored. I suppose bored is probably the wrong word. Lost focus, I think, is probably more what I'm looking for. I don't think I've ever sort of got into a race and thought focus was a problem. It tends to be. Yeah, you've got so many things going on that actually 4 hours goes pretty quick.
And I suppose you sort of train your body for those sort of checking sections, the hydration, and all those sorts of things throughout the race. And I suppose they're all small partial goals along the way to completion of the bigger goal. And we're going to touch on goals now. What types of goals do you set? Do you set them seasonally, yearly, or are they bigger than that? And what are your goals for 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously, well, I always have sort of yearly goals, and certainly this year they changed. But 2021, there, I'm trying to look towards the Ironman World Champs, the 70.3 World Champs, both sort of back end of this year in America in St George. So, that's probably my overall goal for the year. Then, yeah, definitely, we set smaller goals, whether that's, I also want a podium at quite a few of the 70.3 races this year. I've never won a race, and that's probably more short-term goal. That's that's probably the next 6 months I want to do that. The next 3 to 6 months I'd like to hit that one. But then, again, that's still probably a season goal. But then in our training blocks, we've also got, I suppose not necessarily targets for each block, whether it be sort of strength or power or speed, or and there's always, they're not necessarily result goals, but they're more process goals. So have I hit these numbers, or have I learned, have I improved my handling, or whatever it is. There's sort of some goals we'll have for each training block.
Oh, perfect. So it's sort of small, manageable tasks and goals all the way along to hopefully then podium and place well at World Champs and Kona, God willing, shall we say. So with that in mind, obviously you've split your season into smaller cycles. Who decides that, and do you plan your sessions, or do you have somebody that plans your own sessions and plans your year for you?
It's a bit of a combination. So I have a couple of coaches who I work with, but it tends to be at the end of the day, athletes know their body best. It's always a between my coaches and myself as to sort of writing the training plan. I'll have a few ideas as to what I want to work on, and then obviously I'll have their input, and then the coaches will tend to write the specific sessions. But I always find, you're more committed if you sort of really know what you're working on and why you're doing something. So that's the way that I've found has worked over the last few years. And I could probably write my year myself, but it's also having that input and that another set of eyes that take a sort of less objective look at what you need, and can actually say, well, now is not the right time to look at that. Let's look at that in 2-3 months' time when we're about to race, or perhaps we need to look at this.
Yeah, I suppose it's almost like you've got your own self-interests at heart, and then sharing those with others to get a bit of feedback from them is obviously the best way that's going to achieve success. So with your team then, who's in your team and what roles do they play? Obviously, triathlon's an individual sport, and people might not know that triathlon is a team and an individual sort of basis as well.
No, definitely. I mean, I'm quite lucky sort of with the people I've got around me. So sort of being based here in Loughborough, I've got quite good access to loads of different facilities and people. So I work quite closely with a cycling coach. He does my cycling, and then I've got a coach that looks after my swim and my run. So there's 3 people involved there, but then that's probably the core team, I suppose. And then I've got access to nutritionists, sports physiologists. So if ever I'm going to do a hot race, or I need to do some lab testing for sort of lactate thresholds or that sort of thing, I've got that side, and I've also got access, sort of psychologists if I need them. So it's a really big. Although it's a very individual sport, there's definitely a lot of parts that have to come together, and all look over the training plan as well to give you those different viewpoints.
Perfect. Obviously, you touched upon races in hotter climates there. We obviously are a colder climate place, and it's very cool here, obviously with the snow and stuff over here. How do you prepare your body for those races in the hotter climates? Because I know there's a lot out there in different parts of the world.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges as a sports person in the UK is performing in those hot environments. I mean, certainly for myself, I'm not great in the heat. And there's I think, certainly at the minute when on training camps is less feasible. So, that's one way you could do it. You could go out to somewhere, you could go out to the race where you're going to do the race 3 weeks before and get used to the conditions, or you could go somewhere similar if that place is not quite ideal for training. But then you've also got different ways of doing it, such, I've done it before where you cycle sort of indoors with jackets and radiators on, and in the physiology labs at the university, we've got heat chambers, they'll ramp the temperature up to sort of, 30 odd degrees, and you're sitting there on the bike for an hour and, just sort of really trying to condition your body to adapt to the heat, increase the sweat rate, those sort of things to really help you to minimise the cost, I suppose, when you actually do get out there. And then again, there's the other areas to it, such as changing your nutrition plan slightly. Upping your hydration before the event is also very key. Is also really important when you go out to those hot races. So sort of hydration and nutrition are two big areas that you can look at. No matter what facilities you've got access to.
So basically, it's about adapting, but also being creative with your plan and how you do things in the lead up. Perfect. Nutrition, you mentioned there, obviously it's a massive, massive part of triathlon. How do you fuel your training days, but also how do you fuel a 4-hour race? Because obviously some people won't know what things are out there and don't see many triathletes using anything, just thinking,
Yeah. No, and I mean, it's certainly a big area. It's great putting in all this training and all that, but if you don't get your nutrition right, there's limited benefit. I think you'll come unstuck very quickly if it's something you don't look at. I mean, obviously fueling day to day, it's the essentials. It's get a very make sure you're timing your fueling around key sessions. So before if you're doing a hard session, it's your high carbohydrate meals, a few hours before, it's your recovery snacks afterwards, that sort of thing. And then, sort of on the lighter days or the easier sessions, that's when you can afford to, try different strategies or try different things. But I tend to just keep my sort of, try to keep a balanced diet and not get too hung up on actually eating something or not. If I'm hungry, I'll eat it. And I don't beat myself up about what I eat. Then, on top of that, you've obviously got your sport-specific nutrition. So, I mentioned there your recovery, so you can get your recovery, carbohydrate, recovery shakes. But obviously for endurance sport, you use a lot less. Obviously you've got your protein post-gym recovery, but for endurance, we tend to use a lot more. It's sort of carbohydrate protein mix because at the end of the day we're not looking just to repair the muscles. It's about that next session. When you've got 2-3 sessions a day, you need to try and help fuel your body that way. And then obviously during the sessions, your long cycles, you've got things like your energy gels. So basically, just in the simplest form, they're a little packet of sugar, I suppose. Liquid sugar. That you just pop in your back pocket and give you 50 grams of carbs or whatever they are. You've got those. You've got your energy drinks. And as I say, it's just about keeping it all balanced. And I try not to use those too much outside of competition, just so your body doesn't become reliant on them. And actually, they have more effect when you start racing.
Oh, that's perfect. Obviously, it does happen. Obviously, with caffeine, doesn't it? Your body becomes almost immune to caffeine.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of scenario. Have you got a top tip for recovery? Obviously, some people might not do much recovery. Some of our students might not know sort of what recovery is. So, have you got any top tips that you could share that recovery based?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing that I learned, especially after a hard session, is getting it fueling straight away. There's nothing that can beat, whether it's a snack. Largely, it doesn't matter what the snack is straight after a session, as long as you can give your body something. The key message that I've always been given is something is better than nothing after a session. So whether it's a banana or whether it's a sandwich, it doesn't really matter as long as you can give your body something. That's sort of the biggest thing is to sort of training day to day. But then it's the little things like making sure you've got a good sleep routine. So it's turning your phone off probably an hour before you go to bed. But that's been a massive thing for me. Sort of making sure you try and get those 8 hours sleep a night is sort of massive for recovery. Hydration, a lot of people overlook that. It doesn't seem like it will help, but it massively impacts your recovery to the next day. And then I think probably the other biggest thing that I do is sort of your mobility, your self massage. So your foam rollers. Because not everybody's got access to physios, and even I don't see a physio regularly. I just tend to have a solid sort of stretching and mobility routine that I go through most easily. So I make a half an hour slot every day before dinner that's dedicated to that recovery and that routine to make sure I do it. I think that's also a really big part in sort of not getting injured, that side of things as well.
Oh, amazing. That's really good, obviously. So foam rolling and just making sure hydration and food are right after sessions and before sessions is obviously 3 key areas for our students and for us to take away. Do you have a favourite event or track that you race at and you think, this is for me, this suits me?
Yeah. I think actually it's probably Challenge Daytona. That sort of fast flat. A fast flat course is the one that suits me. I'm not great on the hills. You get these guys that are mountain goats that can sort of fly up the hills and make me feel like I'm about to land. But no, so the fast flat courses definitely suit me, and something like a Challenge Daytona or I think I went out to do one last year in Slovakia called Samarin. I think there was about 10 meters of elevation in the whole race. They're the courses that I really enjoy. We can really pick up a nice bit of speed and properly put the hammer down, I suppose.
So anybody out there, find a flat elevation course, and obviously Tom's going to be in the top 3 and you're going to be behind him. Obviously you mentioned Challenge Daytona, which was obviously one of the biggest triathlons ever, I suppose, but obviously especially the prize money out there was absolutely huge. Just touch on what that was, because it was a slightly different event, wasn't it, than you're usually used to and most triathletes are usually used to?
Yeah, no, it was. It was the first time it was run this year, and it was different in the fact that it just had everybody there, and it was on the speedway. So I'm not, people have seen the NASCAR circuits out in the US, and essentially it was cycling around there and running around the same circuit that the guys drive around. So that's pretty cool, and obviously with the field and the prize money, it just made it such a unique race. And then obviously the way that it was broadcast for everybody to watch, I think was something that was quite unique, and is hopefully something that will definitely carry on in triathlon. They're planning a lot more events like that, and hopefully it sort of it can showcase the sport a lot more.
Yeah, I've got to say the coverage was first class. I followed the whole race in all fairness, and it was
good. Yeah,
it was a great evening on Sunday evening. There was nothing else better to watch on TV than men and women absolutely going to their limit with each other with slightly adapted rules. It was brilliant. Just going to touch on one of our GCSE topics and sponsorship. How do you get your sponsors, and what do they expect from you? Do they expect different things?
Yeah, I mean, it is a tricky area, and our sport is still, well, sorry, triathlon is not the biggest sport still, and it's an area that certainly the PTO is trying to look into, and that's one of their big goals, is to help increase sponsorship in the sport. And certainly for new and upcoming athletes, it's quite tricky to sort of get in with sponsors. And actually, a lot of what they ask for now is a lot around social media, and I think that's becoming a lot bigger. It's not just about race results. It's a lot more about what you're doing off the course and what you're doing on social media that impacts on what they'll offer. Yes, I can offer them a spot on your tri-suit, but without the cameras at races and that sort of thing, there's very limited appeal to that. So I think the social side of things is the biggest thing that they ask for, and probably drives the sponsorship almost more than the racing, I would say, in today's climate, especially this last year when obviously we haven't had a chance to race at all. I think sponsors are seeing even more so the value of that side.
Perfect. So last question, best and worst thing about being a pro triathlete?
I think best is, it's being able to do what you genuinely enjoy and call it a job. For the last few years, and I think that's probably been a loose term because I think that much money, it's probably been a glorified hobby. The last couple of years, being able to call it a job is probably, and just being able to swim, bike and run and call that work is a very privileged position, and something, I don't think any sports person can underestimate. I'm reluctant to say worst part because there's bad parts to any sort of job, but it's the cold hard days, the ones where you can't get out of bed. They're your 5 o'clock run. It's raining. 5 o'clock in the morning. It's raining outside. It's dark. You're tired from the last day. They're the hard days. But then I still think you've got to appreciate that it's a job you're doing and very few people get to do it, so it's the worst part, but at the same time it's not that bad in the context of most jobs, I suppose.
Super, perfect, Tom, and obviously that's wrapped it up brilliantly there, and I think our students will get a hell of a lot from that, great insight and sort of great knowledge and awareness of where you're at currently, and we all wish you the very best of luck for 2021 and beyond. And for everybody else, that is a question of the Ferrers Sport episode 4 with pro triathlete Tom Davis. Cheers, Tom.